Our cover story tonight is the world's most pressing concern right now, the global food crisis. There's a serious shortage of food. Everyone is feeling the pinch. No matter which part of the world you're in, you're paying more at supermarkets. For some people, these price hikes and shortages can be life-threatening. More than 200 million people the world over could starve in the coming months if supplies are not restored. 200 million. And this may just be the beginning. The United Nations says if the world does not act immediately, these shortages will continue for decades. The scale of the problem is immense and no country can fix it alone. So what's causing these shortages? As the world remains caught in multiple wars, our food supply is being weaponized. Is someone holding the world hostage by hoarding grains? The United States is pointing fingers at Russia. The Americans are blaming Vladimir Putin for the shortages. They say the Russian invasion of Ukraine has disrupted food supply chains. And now Russia wants to starve the world to win the war. Listen to what the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said.
The consequences of these actions have been devastating. The food supply for millions of Ukrainians and millions more around the world has quite literally been held hostage by the Russian military. The Russian government seems to believe that using food as a weapon will help accomplish what its invasion has not, to break the spirit of the Ukrainian people.
Now that's a big charge. Antony Blinken made that statement at a special session of the United Nations Security Council, the UNSC. They were discussing the global food shortages. America's charge is quite clear. They say there's enough food in the world, but it's not reaching those who need it because Russia will not allow it. Does this case hold water? Is Russia indeed using food as a weapon? Who is hoarding the world's food? On Gravitas tonight, that's what we'll discuss. We'll start with examining America's allegations. They say the Russian military is holding the world's food supply. How? By blocking food consignments at ports. That's America's accusation. Russian forces have blockaded Ukrainian shipping ports, and these are not empty ports. About 28 million tons of grain is stuck there in Ukraine. And that's enough to feed millions of people around the world. Ukraine grows enough food to feed 400 million people every year. With Russia, it supplies 30% of the world's wheat. And now this stock has vanished from the global markets. Reports say 50 million people around the world are waiting for supplies. If the exports do not resume, they will all starve. The United States is demanding that Russia lift the blockade. And they're not alone in making this demand. The G7 too is blaming Russia. They say Russia's actions have raised the risk of a hunger crisis. So what is Moscow's response? Well, they're hitting back at the West. Russia is blaming Western sanctions for disrupting food supplies.
But after the 24th of February, what we saw was an absolute bacchanal against our country alone. Today, so far in total, there are more than 10,000 sanctions. The result of this is that transport routes have been cut off. There is a logistical crisis. There are threats to Russian ships and they can't get out of ports. There is also a problem with freight and insurance, limits on international commercial accounts. This isn't even a full list.
Seems like Russians are more worried about their own exports. The fact is that the world needs both Ukraine and Russia to start supplying food again. Before the war, these countries supplied more than 30% of the world's wheat, more than 17% of the world's corn, and almost 80% of the world's sunflower oil. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has been negotiating with Moscow. He wants the blockade in Ukraine to be lifted, but Russia refuses to make concessions. They first want some sanctions relief. A statement has come out of Moscow. Dmitry Medvedev has spoken out. He's the former president of Russia. Right now, he's a senior security official. And I have that statement with me. This is what he says. Our country is ready to fulfill its obligations in full, but it also expects assistance from trading partners. Otherwise, there's no logic. On the one hand, insane sanctions are being imposed against us. On the other, they're demanding food supplies. Things don't work like that. We are not idiots. That's what he says. We are not idiots. So neither side is prepared to relent. And this standoff puts millions of lives at risk. What happens when shortages become worse? There'll be hoarding of grains, especially in the rich countries. Yesterday, India too spoke out at the United Nations. It warned against the hoarding of food grains. And this is what India said, and I'm quoting again. We have already seen to our great cost how these principles were disregarded in the case of COVID-19 vaccines. Open markets must not become an argument to perpetuate inequity and promote discrimination. A fractured global order will make the food crisis worse. Food is not a weapon. Food should not be a weapon. It's a victim of the war in Ukraine, and it's now being used to score political points. For the moment, we'll get back to where we started, the war in Europe. Clearly, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has had a ripple effect. While food security has been challenged, so has the security order in Europe. Let's focus on that for the moment, the security order. Russia's war in Ukraine has forced European countries to reassess neutrality, even become part of the power rivalry. Nordic countries like Finland and Sweden have chosen to pivot towards NATO. If you've been following the news, you know that both Finland and Sweden have applied for NATO membership. Turkey won't sign on Finland or Sweden's NATO application. Why does it have to? Well, because Turkey is a NATO member country, and NATO's rules are pretty clear. Any new members can come on board only if all existing members support the bid. We're talking about all 30 NATO members. Any of these 30 can veto. And Turkey is not just vetoing, it is also lobbying the others to do the same. Listen to it from the horse's mouth.
Ve biz de eğer Türkiye isek
We will continue this policy resolutely. We have told our relevant friends we would say no to Finland and Sweden's entry into NATO, and we will continue on our path like this. If a country says no, what can they do? What can they not do within the NATO alliance? They cannot take a candidate country. At the moment, we are also absolutely concerned about these two countries, especially Sweden, which is definitely a focus of terror, a home of terror. They also impose sanctions on us regarding weapons.
Like you heard, Turkey is citing terror as the reason for blocking Sweden. What about Finland? It does not sit well with Turkey that Finland harbors Kurdish groups. So that's the terror card yet again. But this game is not so simple. It's hard to factor out Turkey's proximity to Russia, or look through the influence Putin has over Ankara. Turkey is one of the few NATO countries that has not sanctioned Russia. Reports say it has become a safe haven for the money of Russian oligarchs. Even before the war began, Turkey's ties with Russia were under the spotlight. Ankara, remember, has purchased the S-400 missile defense system from Russia, and it has been sanctioned by the US for doing so. Many experts are of the opinion that Turkey no longer fits into NATO. Some say Turkey could very well be Russia's secret weapon inside NATO. If that's true, currently Turkey is Russia's weapon against the expansion of NATO. It could not have been put to better use than the way it's being used now. Today, neutrality is no longer being viewed as a viable option in Europe. Countries are restructuring their policies to stay in tune with the current security order. Threats are reigning. There's a lot of speculation. It may not be long before Switzerland too joins the queue to stand under NATO's umbrella. After all, it has aligned with the European Union sanctions on Russia. Austria could be next. After all, it has long been part of the EU's defense policy. As we speak, the map of Europe is currently being redrawn, and we are left with a chicken and egg situation. What triggered all of this? Is it Russia's expansionism or NATO's expansionism? Either way, it does not matter to the country that's caught in the proxy war of this great power rivalry. Strikes continue in Ukraine. Its houses continue to be destroyed. Facilities continue to be flattened. People remain trapped, and the West continues to put its weight behind Ukraine. In the latest, G7 has announced that it will be sending $18.4 billion to Ukraine. The United States has also approved an additional aid package worth $40 billion. According to some estimates, the US is spending $100 million every day on the war in Ukraine. Well, that's the least they can do for a country caught in the West's political tug of war, you could say. By the time we reconnect next week, the focus of this war would have shifted to the NATO headquarters in Brussels. And since we're discussing wars and weaponization, how could we not talk about Pakistan, a country adept at weaponizing issues, even if its attempts end up misfiring? Something similar happened recently. Pakistan tried weaponizing the Kashmir issue in the United States. And like always, it was left with egg on its face. Let's tell you what happened. Pakistan's foreign minister went to New York, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, a known gaffe machine famous for his slips of tongue. This was his first official foreign visit as the foreign minister. The aim was to impress the international audience and gather support for the new government. In Pakistan's eyes, there's no better way to do this than target India, and that's exactly what Bilawal did. he met Antonio Guterres, the chief of the United Nations. He talked to him about India. What exactly? What else but Jammu and Kashmir? Reports say Bilawal told the UN chief that peace with India will remain elusive unless the Jammu and Kashmir issue is resolved. He also slammed India for the abrogation of Article 370, a move that India has repeatedly called an internal matter aimed at the development of the Kashmiri people. Well, speaking at the UNSC, the United Nations Security Council, Indian diplomat Rajesh Parihar called Pakistan's attempt a Pavlovian response aimed at misusing the UN forum. He said the only contribution Pakistan can make to resolve this issue is to stop state-sponsored terrorism. Listen to this.
I'm constrained to take the floor again at this late hour. In the interest of time, I'll be brief. Pakistan's representative made unwarranted remarks which symbolizes nothing but a Pavlovian response aimed to misuse any forum and every topic to propagate false and malicious propaganda against my country. The Union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh were, are, and will always remain an integral and inalienable part of India. This includes the areas that are under the illegal occupation of Pakistan. No amount of rhetoric and propaganda from any country can deny this fact. The only contribution that Pakistan can make is to stop state-sponsored terrorism. As regard to his other remarks, we will treat it with the contempt it deserves. I thank you, Mr. President.
Treat it with the contempt it deserves, he says. No better way to put it. The thing is, Pakistan's economy is in the doldrums. Inflation is at a record high. The currency is at its weakest. Foreign reserves are running out. The country is languishing in the FATF grey list. And what is the one thing that they continue to focus on? Kashmir. Pakistan needs to focus on how to feed its people, which, to be honest, was the real agenda of Bilawal's visit there. On Wednesday, he met the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. This was their first meeting. What was it about? Ensuring food supplies. Listen to this.
Thank you so much, Secretary Blinken. It is such a pleasure to be here at the United Nations, and we look forward to engaging on the series of events on global food security. We are aware that recent geopolitical events have indeed aggravated the situation, and countries like Pakistan have already been facing challenges in food security, water security, energy security, because of a whole host of issues ranging from climate change to issues in our neighborhood. So this particular initiative is most welcome and most important.
Full marks for the accent, 0 for being discreet. He spelled out all of Pakistan's problems in one go. Food scarcity, water shortage, lack of energy, all of it. And we thought foreign ministers were supposed to be diplomatic. Well, things got more bizarre when Mr. Foreign Minister sang praises of the former Prime Minister, Imran Khan, his arch enemy. Look at the headline on your screens. In the US, Bilawal defends Imran's Moscow visit. Now, you may recall that on the 24th of February, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Imran Khan went to Moscow. He called the situation, quote-unquote, exciting. And you know what followed? Imran Khan was removed from his post, the PM's post, within a month, and he blamed a US conspiracy for his ouster. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari has now defended this Moscow visit. He says Imran Khan was unaware. He did not know about the invasion. Listen to this.
As far as the former Prime Minister's trip to Russia, I would absolutely defend the former Prime Minister of Pakistan. Pakistan's Prime Minister conducted that trip as part of his foreign policy, and without knowing that no one is psychic. No one has a sixth sense. There's no way we could have possibly known that would have been the time to start, that the current conflict would start.
Well, you heard that. No one is psychic. No one has a sixth sense. Such maturity. Only if someone could tell Bilawal Bhutto Zardari that Imran Khan is not returning the favor. Last we checked, he had called his US visit a beg for money trip. It's funny how soon the dynamics change. A leader who was recently roaming the world with a begging bowl himself is now accusing others of doing the same. Speaking of which, Pakistan has told the IMF that it's ready for reforms. It has agreed to implement the IMF's demands. What kind of demands? A hike in the price of petroleum products, electricity prices, taxes, to name a few. What made Pakistan do this? Low reserves, a weak rupee, and no foreign aid. The new government, it seems, is as clueless as the previous one. It's unable to solve the economic crisis. The clock is ticking. The country will go to polls again next year, or if things don't go well, perhaps in a few months from now. Here's a report.
आप देख रहे हैं कि किला कोला कासिम बाग स्टेडियम जो है वो इस वक्त तैयारियां जोरों शोर पे हैं.
These images are from Multan, the venue for Imran Khan's final rally. Reports say he is expected to deliver a historic address here, that he's going to make a final call, a call for his supporters to march to Islamabad. Imran Khan has already dropped the hint.
हमारी इस्लामाबाद मार्च से पहले जो आखिरी जलसा है वो कल मुल्तान में होगा इंशाअल्लाह, और उसमें मैं आप सबको वो दिन बताऊंगा जिस दिन मेरी सारी कौम ने इस्लामाबाद पहुंचना है.
So what happens when the call is made? It's hard to tell, but going by Imran Khan's speeches, he plans to paralyze Islamabad until general elections are held. Will his plan work? No one knows. The Shehbaz Sharif government has refused to give in. It has decided to complete its constitutional tenure. It has no other choice. An election right now could prove costly. Pakistan's economic situation is worsening by the day. The rupee-dollar parity is slipping. On Thursday, it was valued at 195 rupees to a dollar, the lowest level on record. Same story with Pakistan's foreign reserves. They've dropped to $16.4 billion, their lowest level since December 2019. To put it simply, Pakistan is in dire straits. So much so that it has agreed to the IMF's demands. The IMF had asked Islamabad to hike prices in certain sectors if it wanted to revive a $6 billion fund program. Islamabad has agreed. In the coming weeks, it's going to hike prices in the petroleum and energy sectors. It has already banned import of luxurious items, a move aimed at saving foreign exchange reserves. Among the items banned are automobiles, mobile phones, home appliances, musical instruments, crockery, furniture, kitchenware, frozen fish, even tissue paper. How much money is Pakistan going to save through this ban? The officials are confused. The country's information minister says this move will save $500 million a month. Pakistan's Federal Board of Revenue says it will save $300 million. And the Prime Minister's Secretariat says this move will save $250 million. And we thought the new government was supposed to be more competent and experienced than the previous one.
We told you about some worrying developments. China building bridges in eastern Ladakh on the border with India. It is expanding its military infrastructure. The intention of the PLA is quite clear. It wants to gain an advantage over the Indian forces in the region. Now, yesterday, India responded to these developments. New Delhi says Beijing is building military infrastructure on occupied land.
We have seen media reports and other reports on the so-called bridge, or I don't know if it's another, somebody said second bridge, or if it's an expansion or widening of the current bridge. Look, probably, and the area that is referred to is, of course, we've always felt this was occupied, and we have had our, for decades.
Which area are we talking about? The Pangong Lake, also called the Pangong Tso. Around 50% of this lake lies within Tibet, controlled by China. 40% of it is in Ladakh. Around 10% of this area is disputed. It falls within the de facto buffer zone between India and China. This area is part of Aksai Chin, which China has illegally occupied. Pangong Tso was one of the most crucial flashpoints in the latest border standoff. Indian and Chinese troops disengaged last year from this lake, but now China is believed to be building bridges there again. Some clarity has emerged about the Chinese construction activity. Remember, China has already built a bridge in this disputed area. Now, reports say that this was a support bridge. China began building it in October 2021. It was completed last month. This was a Bailey Bridge. It was built to support the construction of the main bridge, the one that China has just started to build. Construction is still in the early stages. Reports say China dumped the construction material last month. The work on the bridge has just commenced. Satellite images show piers, construction material and cranes on the site. And the concerns remain the same. The PLA wants to move its troops and armoured vehicles faster from its garrisons to the border with India. China is building feeder roads with the bridge for this. The bridge will connect the north and south banks of Pangong Tso. Earlier, it took Chinese forces up to 12 hours to cover this distance. Reports say this bridge will cut that travel time to just 3 to 4 hours. So the Chinese will be able to deploy quickly. Despite the talk of disengagement, China has been intensifying its construction activity. It is trying to alter the landscape. It is said to have established more than 600 militarized border villages, and they're believed to be in Tibet. Experts say this is similar to what China is doing in the South China Sea. The Chinese have built artificial militarized islands in the disputed waters in South China Sea. So what will Beijing achieve from all of this? The military infrastructure is part of China's strategy of expansionism. While pretending to discuss a truce with India, what they're actually doing is this: they're building up their own infrastructure on disputed lands, in disputed territories. This is an attempt to challenge the status quo, change the facts on the ground and force India to accept a new reality. But India is not defenseless. It has its own distinct advantages. Indian forces are more experienced in high-altitude warfare. And to support these Indian forces, New Delhi is ramping up its own military infrastructure. It has sanctioned 32 new roads along the border with China. Work has already started on 8 of these, 8 roads. So whatever may be China's game plan, India plans to match the Chinese build-up toe-to-toe. US President Joe Biden is trying to mount his own defense against China. His response is an alliance of democracies. The focus is on Asia, finally. And with that in mind, Biden has embarked on a tour of Asian countries. His first stop is South Korea. He's the first leader. Joe Biden is the first leader to meet South Korea's new president, Yoon Suk-yeol. What does the US president hope to achieve in this trip? Our next report has some answers.
Typically 4th of July,
Joe Biden's government faces a crisis of confidence. The war in Ukraine has taken his attention away from China. Biden's Asia tour is an attempt to put his China policy back on track. Soon after arriving in Seoul, Biden toured a chip manufacturing facility. It is similar to the one that the US president wants to build in Texas. Biden hailed America's strong economic ties to South Korea.
Putin's brutal and unprovoked war in Ukraine has further spotlighted the need to secure our critical supply chains so that our economy, our economic and our national security are not dependent on countries that don't share our values. A critical component of how we'll do that, in my view, is by working with close partners who do share our values, like the Republic of Korea, to secure more of what we need from our allies and partners and bolster our supply chain resilience.
Accompanying Biden was South Korea's new president, Yoon Suk-yeol. He sought incentives for the South Korean companies in America.
I also look forward to President Biden's support for incentives to be enjoyed by Korean semiconductor companies when investing in the U.S. I look forward to today's visit translating into U.S.-ROK partnership blossoming into an economic and security alliance based on our partnership for advanced technologies and global supply chain. Thank you.
Yoon is a political newcomer, but he has clear expectations from the United States, especially when it comes to North Korea. Yoon wants to take a tougher line against the North. Pyongyang has stepped up its missile tests. This year it has conducted 16 of them already. There is a fear that Kim Jong-un might order another test when Biden is in South Korea.
There have been a number of missile tests this year, and of course North Korea has a long history going back decades at this point of missile tests, both to advance their capabilities and to cause provocations. We are prepared for those eventualities.
The Biden administration is prepared for that. Biden's Asia visit is supposed to reassure Asian allies and reaffirm key security partnerships. The US president wants to show his partners that he can be a reliable partner against China.
Now, this issue is likely to come up in the upcoming Quad summit too. Biden will soon be flying down for it to Japan. So will be India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida will be hosting them. He will also be welcoming Australia's Prime Minister. But who will that be? Who will be Australia's Prime Minister attending the Quad summit? We don't know. Scott Morrison has been Australia's Prime Minister since 2018. It's hard to say whether he will remain in office after the May 21st elections. That's tomorrow. We're being told it's a tight race. Incumbent Morrison is up against Anthony Albanese. He is the leader of Australia's Labour Party, 59 years old. He has served as a cabinet minister under multiple prime ministers, be it Kevin Rudd or Julia Gillard. In fact, Albanese was also a deputy prime minister under Rudd. Goes without saying, he's a seasoned politician. He likes being portrayed as a working class man. He accuses Morrison of lacking leadership. Morrison's party, on the other hand, has been telling Australians that it, quote unquote, won't be easy under Albanese. The slogan focuses on the proposed economic policies. This election is being fought on a range of issues, in fact. Economy, of course, tops the chart. Inflation has hit a 20-year high in Australia. Cost of living has increased drastically. Then there's the supply chain crisis. Also global uncertainty, given the war in Europe. And how can we forget the climate emergency? Australia has been fighting some of its worst wildfires and floods in recent history. Albanese is expected to be more climate-friendly in comparison to Scott Morrison. But here's something experts have been pointing out time and again. No matter who wins Australia, nothing changes drastically at home. And that's because in Australia, prominent parties rarely have deep ideological divide. In other words, they more or less agree on a basic structure when it comes to running the government. Where they differ is their approach to the world. Scott Morrison, for instance, tore up Australia's contract for French-built submarines. Albanese criticised him for doing it. He even called him weak. Morrison has also been called a vocal critic of China. His government called for an investigation into the origin of the Wuhan virus. When China announced its security pact with the Solomon Islands, the Morrison government spared no harsh words to criticise it. Morrison's ministers even hinted at the possibility of a war with China. Will Albanese go down the same road? Experts say he's likely to be less stern and more diplomatic when it comes to dealing with Beijing. Recently, AUKUS featured as a bone of contention between Morrison and Albanese. Albanese, in fact, criticised the sitting Prime Minister for not briefing the opposition before signing that deal on nuclear submarines with the US and the UK. Morrison said there was no need to brief the opposition.
This was one of the most secure and highly confidential agreements the Australian government had entered into since ANZUS.
This Prime Minister has continued to play politics and to suggest that that wasn't the case at each and every opportunity. The problem for this Prime Minister is that he's always looking for a conflict and a division.
Albanese's party calls China's pact with the Solomon Islands the quote-unquote worst failure of Australian foreign policy in the Pacific. He's not said much about his own policies in China. He has promised to be completely consistent with the Morrison government on Chinese competition. But he was asked whether he will call Chinese President Xi Jinping should he become the Prime Minister, and Albanese refused to comment. He said that his priority would be to meet Australia's allies. In fact, let me read out what he told an Australian newspaper. I will visit the Quad and renew my acquaintance with President Joe Biden, but also meet, very importantly, with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who are important friends of Australia. So he already has a plan in place in case he wins tomorrow's election. It involves a swearing-in ceremony as early as the 22nd of May, that's Sunday, so that he can quickly fly down to Japan to attend the Quad meeting. What are the chances that Albanese will indeed be flying to Tokyo for this meeting? Well, quite high, actually. Polls show him leading the race. It's a tight race, but he's in the lead. Morrison, on the other hand, may lose out on voters for reportedly delaying the rollout of Wuhan virus vaccines, or holidaying in Hawaii when Australia was fighting wildfires, or failing to handle rape allegations involving politicians. Whether it will be Morrison or Albanese joining the summit at the Quad is something more than 17 million voters of Australia will decide. And whichever way the election swings, whichever leader lands in Tokyo, Gravitas will keep you ahead with the latest. As the news moves to Japan, so does this show. We'll be bringing you exclusive insights and ground reports from Tokyo. We will cover the Quad Summit and all the bilateral meetings on the sidelines. Gravitas Tokyo edition goes live from Japan.
Tokyo Summit. As the dragon looks to sail the high seas, the Alliance of Democracies convenes again. Joe Biden, President, United States. Narendra Modi, Prime Minister, India. Fumio Kishida, Prime Minister, Japan. Scott Morrison, Prime Minister, Australia. On a mission to protect the Indo-Pacific. Catch Gravitas Tokyo Edition, May 23rd onwards, only on WION. The world is one.
We now turn to Hollywood's biggest courtroom drama, the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard defamation trial. It has entered its 5th week and things are only getting uglier. There are more explicit testimonies, more controversial personal details, more allegations of physical abuse. Both sides remain unrelenting. Both sides say the other is lying. So where is the case headed and how long will it go on? Here's a report.
The Amber Heard and Johnny Depp defamation trial is getting uglier by the day. As their personal and often toxic testimonies unravel, it doesn't look anything less than a Hollywood drama. Depp has accused Heard of often striking out. Heard herself has made similar accusations against her ex-husband.
Ms. Heard, in her frustration and in her rage and her anger, she would strike out. She would. It could begin with a slap. It could begin with a shove. It could begin with, throwing a TV remote at my head. It could be throwing a glass of wine in my face.
I don't know how much time passed, but at some point he had a broken bottle up against my face, neck area by my jawline, and he told me he'd carve up my face. I don't know at what point in the evening. I couldn't tell you what sequence-wise when that happened, but it was terrifying.
Interestingly, the latest proceeding also had a twist. Actress Ellen Barkin testified against Johnny Depp, claiming to have been in a sexual relationship with him.
He's just a jealous man, controlling. Where are you going? Who are you going with? What did you do last night? I had a scratch on my back once that got him very, very angry because he insisted it came from me having sex with a person who wasn't him.
This was followed by yet another twist, a taped deposition by Depp's former agent. She spoke about her working relationship with the actor, whose reputation got ruined by his unprofessional behavior.
Well, initially, crews loved him because he was always so great with the crew, but crews don't love sitting around for hours and hours and hours waiting for the star of the movie to show up. And it also got around town. I mean, people talk. It's a small community. And it made people reluctant to use him.
Amber Heard's talent agent, Jessica Kovacevic, also gave a testimony. Speaking about Heard's professional life, she said her career has become a victim of bad press.
There was a movie at Amazon that she had been offered with Gael Garcia Bernal. I don't know what the final title of it is called now. I can look it up. It had a working title at the time. That they took away from her. And, the lead actor who was a producer on it very much wanted it to be her and was very frustrated with the process. And no one can say out loud, we're taking this away from her because, of this bad press, because it's nothing she did, and it's all hearsay, and it's all, whatever. But there's no other reason.
The 6-week trial has entered its 5th week. Which side is winning? No one knows. But social media is already siding with Johnny Depp. We'll have to wait and watch to see if the jury agrees. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Now here's a question for you. What all can you do with $1,600? That's more than 1 lakh Indian rupees. A month's rent for some people, monthly household income for many, an EMI for a luxury car for others, the annual school fee for quite a few. Or you can buy an umbrella. Well, the world is shocked that 2 of the biggest brands have collaborated, 2 of the biggest brands in the world, and the result is ridiculous because this umbrella, worth more than $1,600 is not even going to protect you from rain.
Rain, rain, go away. Come again another day. Because this fancy umbrella isn't going to do its basic job, to protect you from the rain. Twitterati is shocked. The internet is in splits. We're gasping too. Luxury label Gucci and sportswear brand Adidas have taken the award for shock value at the very least, for hoping to sell an 11,100 yuan umbrella in China. That's more than $1,600 and nearly 1.3 lakh Indian rupees. That's not the punchline. Wait for it. This luxury umbrella isn't even waterproof. China's Weibo is outraged, as is the world. While the world of luxury is famous for grabbing headlines for exorbitant price tags, exclusive experiences, and utter shock value, this is the definition of bizarre. An umbrella which doesn't even protect us from rain. What's next? An odorless perfume, perhaps? A bulb that doesn't glow? An air conditioner which doesn't cool? Or worse, shoes without a sole. Speaking of shoes, in yet another inexplicable launch, another luxury brand tried to shock us in its bid to be a fashion disruptor. Balenciaga launched its collection of overly worn shoes. Distressed sneakers, destroyed shoes. It's called the Paris sneaker, and the price goes as high as $1,850. The brand said it's going for a pre-worn look, but the internet said the shoes have mocked the homeless. So this one has backfired too. Coming back to the umbrella that has us cracking up, the brand put out a disclaimer later saying that the parasol doesn't block rain, but simply provides shade from the sun and is for decorative purposes. Come on, are we being trolled? Brands have always pushed creative boundaries in a bid to create cultural symbols through outlandish designs with jaw-dropping price tags. Tiny thumb-sized bags which are meme-worthy. Paper clips worth $185. Dresses made of plastic bags costing more than $700. But if you join the waitlist for a designer umbrella that isn't waterproof, then the joke might be on you, especially when it starts pouring. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And now let's take a look at what else is making news across the world. This is Gravitas Global Headlines.
Students in South Africa staged protests following a racist incident at Stellenbosch University, where a white student was filmed urinating on a black student's books and laptop. The undergraduate student has now been suspended. In Afghanistan, the Taliban have brought in a new restriction for women, directing all female presenters on TV channels to cover their faces while presenting programs. The WHO has convened an emergency meeting of experts to discuss the monkeypox outbreak, after multiple cases of monkeypox were reported in the US, Europe, and Australia. United States Oklahoma State has approved a bill banning abortion from the moment of fertilization, with some exceptions, in one of the strictest bans in the country so far. US streaming service Netflix has agreed to settle a tax dispute with Italy by paying $59 million in a 3-year-old tax evasion case. Food and energy prices are dragging Italy toward a record 6.8% inflation rate, which is the highest level since joining the common euro currency in 1999. 2 people were shot in Michigan on Thursday following graduation ceremonies at the East Kentwood High School. About 60 students and their families were at the school's stadium for graduation when the incident took place. Bangladesh's northeastern Sylhet region is flooded, with schools and shops shut as heavy pre-monsoon fills local rivers. 4 people have died in the floods. The Boston Celtics have leveled the NBA Eastern Conference Finals with a 127-102 point win over the Miami Heat in Game 2. Marcus Smart starred for the Celtics on his return with 24 points, 12 assists and 9 rebounds. 2-time world champion Fernando Alonso has accused Formula One's governing body, the FIA, of incompetence and lacking race knowledge. The driver collected 2 5-second penalties during the previous race in Miami, which dropped him from 8th to 11th.